Welcome everyone, a guy trying here, and I hope everyone is excited for Seeds of Unity. The set's been fully revealed and there's a ton of interesting decks I'm hoping to try when it comes out. Unfortunately, we'll have to wait a little longer to get our hands on it, as there was a production issue that meant Equinox had to delay shipping. So while retailer delivery and official release was supposed to happen this week, most things will be pushed back 2 weeks. The set will now release on February 27th, with the backers getting their shipments shortly after. This has obviously caused some disappointment in the community because we want to play with the new toys, and this is a telling moment in the game's shift to self-distribution. But this has actually been a pretty common occurrence in TCGs recently. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, One Piece, Magic the Gathering, and Riftbound have all experienced some delays in product within the last few months. I say this not to invalidate any annoyance people might feel, but just to give some context. And if you've been keeping up with Altered, you know that even though Set 5 has not been released yet, Equinox is already preparing to launch the game found for Set 6, Roots of Corruption. The initial information and reveal season for Roots will begin on March 3rd, and the campaign will launch a week later on the 10th. This means there's a fair possibility that backers won't have received their Seeds of Unity pledges before being asked to back another, and individuals will only have 10 days to make a decision before the campaign closes on March 20th. To give players the most information possible, retailer pledges will actually end on the 16th, and be reported to players a few days later. Shops will be able to place orders starting March 3rd, giving them about 2 weeks from open to close. However, this will be so soon after the release of Seeds that they won't really have sales data from Set 5 to inform Set 6 orders. There was always going to be some strain with how close the game found has to be to the previous set's release, but the added delay will just compound the issue. But heading back to Seeds of Unity, there's always a patch that coincides with the start of a new season, but Equinox has decided not to delay the patch and instead announce the changes that are now in effect. It's no secret that Sigismar, Kojo, and Trace have been dominating the meta for a few seasons now, and all of them will be affected by the patch. Sigismar will find that his reinforcements will be a little late, as he will no longer create a recruit on day 1. The team believes that this will reduce his ability to double advance on the first day, and therefore only have to advance at parity after that. There are some that think this is too light of an errata, but this should help extend games against Sigismar at least another day, which can often be life or death against the hero. While he's been dominant since the fall of Waru, Equinox felt it was dangerous to change one of the starter deck heroes because it would make it more difficult when introducing new players. Now that there is a new upcoming Ortis starter, they felt it was the right time. That is our only errata for the patch, but there have also been a number of suspensions to high-functioning cards in top meta performers. Bravos will see the staples of Tiny Jin and Haven Sarengar suspended, as both gave such consistent value for no real commitment, and allowed Bravos decks to get towards late game earlier and keep card advantage along the way. Even though there's only one rarity of each card that is currently seeing heavy usage, both in-faction rarities have been suspended because players would most likely just swap in the other rarity after the patch if they could. Restocking Station in Bravos has also been suspended, despite not seeing high usage, because the card itself creates incredibly repetitive sequences, and is mainly a side effect of our next suspensions. Axiom will see the common Restocking Station suspended, which has become a staple in Traced and Subash decks, and threatened a seemingly endless value engine when paired with our next card, Dr. Frankenstein. From Reserve, Dr. Frankenstein can target permanents like Haven, Bug-Out Bag, or Aerolith Reef for card advantage, board presence, or removal depending on the situation. But when allied with a Restocking Station, Frankenstein could get 2 keyline counters onto Restocking Station, and then have his fleeting removed by only using 1 counter. This lets players continuously have a stocked reserve, while also building up Restocking Station. Our final suspension for Axiom is the Grems. These chaotic creatures could easily slot into any Axiom deck because of their versatility. In exchange for 1 forest stat off rate, you could threaten both your opponent's low-cost permanents as well as present a strong board state. I've seen a few ask why don't they look into all modal cards if that's the issue, but the real problem is that if the Grems was printed with only either of those abilities, they'd still be incredibly playable, and presenting both options for almost no deck building cost was too powerful. Unlike the suspended Bravos cards, the alternate rarities of these cards will remain legal in Standard. As a little bonus in the patch, Rare Celebration Day in both Ortis and Izmir is being suspended for creating a negative player experience. These cards are central to the hostage or prison game plans, as they've become known by the community, where a player will attempt to hold the game in a stalemate and advance using cards like Small Step Giant Leap or Grand Endeavor before Celebration Day's effect is active. This strategy basically becomes fully online at 14 mana, after which the opponent has very few ways to meaningfully interact with the game. Eventually, the Hostage player's deck is so small that they are guaranteed to get to play Celebration Day and their win condition every turn because of Altered Shuffle rule. Just in case you're unaware, when a player has no deck remaining, they shuffle their discard and use that as their deck. However, this rule is getting changed. Effective with the patch, a deck check for shuffling will only occur during morning, and occur at any point during the morning phase. So, if you're playing Fen and have 2 cards in your deck, you draw, put into mana, and then be able to shuffle and refresh before your resupply happens at noon. However, now if you had 3 cards in deck, you couldn't refresh after your noon resupply. And they've made shuffling a choice, not a requirement, in case players need specific cards in their discard piles for synergies. Well, I'm sure that isn't a precursor to a certain set 6 hero that revolves around discarding. While Hostage decks are definitely affected by the rule change, it mainly hits Hyperloop resupply decks that were utilizing Uniques or Axiom Ouroboros to cycle through their deck multiple times in a turn to find key cards. In fact, Axiom Ouroboros is one of 2 non-unique cards being added to the watch list for this reason. Equinox feels the fact that a single turn could take several minutes of looping creates a negative player experience. The other card added is All Forms of Counting Sheep, which by itself is relatively unassuming, but when paired with Lyra Festival can be devastating. It gives the Festival player 2 bodies, both asleep, for low mana investment and makes Festival much more consistent. And to close out our watch list, Equinox are adding the multi-anchoring unique archetype, which can feel overwhelming when played against. They've said they feel these uniques were kept down by the fast speed of Sigismar and the threat of the hunger, but will be monitoring them to see if they become too prevalent. And speaking of the hunger, the Balance team acknowledge that it can feel oppressive, but feel that it holds an important place as a predator in the meta ecosystem. While powerful, Equinox believes that the slowing down of Bravos due to other suspensions will keep them in check. It's not on the watch list, but it's being monitored. Overall, I think the Balance patch should do a good job of opening up the meta. I think Sigismar might have gotten off too easy and Axiom hit a bit too hard. Frankenstein is incredibly versatile, but it always felt like it was a good representation of a strong rare. It requires Trace to be online and the player to have permanence to properly function, and I think the main problem was the interaction with Restocking Station. That being said, Frankenstein's power also scales as we get more and more cards, which is another issue. My main confusion is the differentiation between the hunger being monitored and not on the watch list. The watch list is not a guarantee of suspension or errata, so why not just put the hunger on there? They also announced that with the launch of Set 7, the set after Roots of Corruption, Altered will begin rotation. With the beginning of Year 3, all 3 Year 1 sets Beyond the Gates, Trial by Frost, and Whispers from the Maze will no longer be standard legal. This is a ways off, and I'll discuss it more as it becomes relevant, but wanted to make a note of it now. While we will have to wait longer to get our hands on Seeds of Unity, demo decks are now available on BGA for Altiplay, and a demo deck tournament will be held on February 22nd. These aren't fully optimized decks, just meant to introduce you to a hero's playstyle within the set. I've said before that I think Set 6 GameFound will be a telling moment for Altered. I believe that if Roots of Corruption is successfully funded, it'll be an upward swing in momentum that can carry the game for a while, but we'll have to see. We're coming off a season with less competitive engagement, and still haven't seen the fruits of the first GameFound. There have been some great positives starting off the year, but the Roots GameFound will be a deciding moment in Altered's history. I'm hopeful because I think the game is amazing and only gets better with each set, but there's always hiccups from Equinox to slow us down a bit. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this helpful in some way. If you did, feel free to like and subscribe. But if you made it this far, just know that I'm happy you stayed with me this long. What do you think of the balance changes? What are you most excited to play when you get your hands on Seeds of Unity? That's all for now, but I hope we see each other again.